Order 604, Sites and Facilities for June 16th. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming, committee members, Board of Ed members, and everybody else in the district. I'm going to start off because we have quite a few things we need to get to tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Seelig, who's going to start us off with, I believe you're going to take item number 1.
Yeah, actually, I wanted Dr. Casimiro to speak to that one. So if you don't mind starting with 2, and then when she's
Absolutely.
able to jump on. Okay.
Perfect.
So starting with item number 2 is the DHS gym floor, which I am. What's that, Kevin? I'm sorry. Oh, there she is. Okay.
Casimiro is here. She's just having a problem getting in.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll just hold and then we can go in the order.
Okay, no problem.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Kara.
Sorry for the delay.
That's all right.
So one of the items coming up at the next board meeting is going to be the placement of the updated ed specs on the agenda for board approval, so that the city can then take that approved ed specs and send it off to the state for the next round of scrutiny. And so one of the things, actually, Luis, did everybody get sent a copy of the updated ed specs in this group? I just want to make sure that everybody has a copy. If not, Al's shaking his head. So Al, you received something? Great. Okay. And if not, we can certainly send it out again. Just drop it in the chat and we'll get it out to you. But the only real differences in this ed spec from the last one that went out are 2 things. One, it's an updated programming matrix, and I can show you what that looks like in the back of the packet. So actually, let me go in order, just not to make you dizzy with the pages. So can everyone see my screen okay? I have a
Just see the upper corner of it.
Can you see it?
It's just zoomed in real tight on the upper corner of a Word document. And if anybody wants to follow, it is attached to the meeting invite.
Okay, sorry about that. So if you look under the long range plan and project rationale, there were 2 items in the packet that needed to be updated. One had to do with enrollment, and the other one had to do with the updated planning specifications for the new building. Everything that was written and the square footage and the rooms and the sizes were based on the Summit version with the architect, and so that blueprint had to be done over again. The programming is the same. It's just that the specs around the programming matrix had to be updated to reflect the Cardis location plus the BOE side, including the offices and the space that the board would occupy in that new location. So there was just a few small things that were changed in here. In the first line where it said over the last 10 years, Danbury Public School enrollment has increased. That was recently changed to 15%. I believe it said 17% as of this morning. We did have to send out and do a refresh on the enrollment projections because there was a slight decrease and we needed to update that. Now, the reality of the enrollment is that the numbers are drawn from the October 1st collection. So when they count the projected enrollment, it's drawn off October 1st. I think Mike has the updated number of how many students we have since gained since the October 1st collection. I believe was a couple of hundred students not accounted for, and so already in the projections we know we're off in that case. So we did meet with the demographers this morning just to make sure that we understood their methodology and how they calculated the students. By and large, it wasn't a huge discrepancy, but we wanted to make sure that they knew that we had a few extra students here than what they had accounted for in some of the projections. And we just wanted to understand how that may or may not impact the specs and then the subsequent reimbursement. And so Turns out it's just it's a small dip in terms of the fluctuation, so I don't think it's going to have any impact. But certainly, Antonio and Dan Petrovich would know a little bit more about how that may or may not affect the application. But overall, not much of a change. But we did note those changes in the enrollment here on this first page. Okay. And then you can see the remainder of the project rationale with the vision, mission, and I'm not going to bore you with the whole thing because you could read through it. And again, most of the meat in the middle did not change. I have been presenting a more updated version of this chart that you may have seen me present in the board meetings and when the commissioner came. And it's, I think the newer one is a little bit prettier, but because we started off with this chart, we didn't want to change too much because so many folks have already seen the application. So it's best not to mess with any of the graphics in there to make sure that folks were confident that not too much has changed. And so when you scroll down to I believe it's on 32 or 33, you'll see the program design matrix, which was updated right there, starting in section 6, program matrix, and you can see the square footage and the number of rooms that are associated with the pathways that are based on the new footprint in the new building. And you could take a look at that at your leisure. And this was just a swap out from the grid from the summit site. So other than that, really not much changed, but we were waiting for those last minute nitty gritty enrollment numbers to come in so that we make sure that we presented something that was accurate and the most up to date. We had started this almost 2 years ago, so those needed to be updated. And if you have any questions on this at all, I recognize, I'm not sure if anybody here. So Louisa, you were not here originally when we first kind of went through this. Your son was, so he was quite familiar with this document, but certainly if you wanted to take some time to look it over, we recognize we just sent this out to everybody today. Certainly you can email me with questions, and if I don't have the answer, I can certainly email the architect with any questions as well. And Mike is the most up to date on the enrollment issues, so he can help with that too. So unless there's any questions, we can move on to the next agenda item. This will go out to the board in the Friday's packet for everybody to look at over the weekend for approval on the 22nd.
Great. Anybody have any questions?
Louisa, I think you're on mute if you're speaking.
No, can you hear me?
You're good.
Okay. Any questions from the committee, board members?
Louisa,
can you hear me?
Are you off with your
volume? No, she's fine. Louisa, you're fine. I can hear you.
Okay. All right.
Okay, hold on. Sorry, Louisa, we're having some technical. Okay, I couldn't hear anything. Yeah.
Can you
Go ahead,
hear
Louisa. Okay, we're good. Yep.
Okay. Any questions from the committee members or board members? No? All right, let's move on.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Casimiro.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is in regards to the gym floor. I'm sure most of you have seen it at this point. The floor in the old gym developed to humps that were directly related to a burst water pipe in January. To give you a little backstory, if you know where that elevator is, there's a water pipe. It froze, it burst, water went down the elevator. It damaged the ceiling of the weight room. It went down the hallway. It traveled into the gym and got under the wood floor. And as a result, that water, when it heated up due to weather or got humid, the floor popped up. So now there's these two humps that look, Rich has described it as a skate park. So it has these two humps in the floor right now. We've tried to remediate it a couple times by having the flooring company come in. They cut it open, they dry it out, it sits back down. But then just a few weeks later, the moisture moves underneath the floor because it's all shellacked. The moisture doesn't have a chance to dry out. It moves under the floor and the humps pop up somewhere else. So we've had to go ahead and address this issue with our insurance company. And we are going to file a claim for the gym floor, the ceiling of the weight room, and repairs to the elevator and a few other little things. But in order to do that, we're going to have to pay our deductible, which is $250,000. And John Spang is going to tell us a little bit more about how that's going to come together.
Thank you, Mike. If I could just take a quick minute, for folks who are new, and you'll hear us use the word KERMA a lot. KERMA is our insurance company, and a little about their background. Back in the mid-1980s, there was a liability insurance crisis in this country. Premiums tripled, coverages were reduced. Cities and towns just couldn't get coverage in many places. So a lot of different solutions were bandied about, including one right here. Just the same way boards of education have CABE as an organization, cities and towns have what's called CCM, or the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. It's really the same thing as CABE, but for town sides. And back in the 1980s, when this happened, they created a captive insurance company to provide some coverage, and cities and towns were free to join if they wanted to, or they could keep trying to get their insurance some other way. Probably more than half the cities and towns in Connecticut today get their insurance through KERMA. And for all intensive purposes, although they're a sub-organization of CCM, they are an insurance company. The city of Danbury has one insurance policy for both the city and for us, and that's pretty common to have one policy for all of the city or town buildings, and that's what they have. As Mike said, the deductible in the city policy is $250,000. So what that means, if we had a loss of, for example, $300,000, then KERMA would pay above the deductibles. So they, in this case, they'd pay $50,000. We'd be responsible for the deductible, just the same as your car or homeowners. It's the same kind of thing. So that's just the background. Now, we definitely don't have $250,000. It's unplanned at this point, nor do we have plans that we could defer even if we wanted to at this stage. So what we're proposing is something according to the city charter. And in the city charter, there's a section 7.9 called expenditures and accounting. And if you were to look, you'd find it on page 38. I'm going to read it to you. It says, section F, additional appropriations over and above the total budget may be made from time to time by resolution of the city council. But upon recommendation of the mayor, and after being certified by the director of finance, that the money is there in excess of what's being asked for. And what that all means is the city has sometimes it's called a surplus, an undesignated balance, a fund balance. Last time it was tallied in June of 20, it was $25.1 million. And what we're proposing is that we ask the city to release $250,000 to be used as the deductible on this loss. So once everything's paid, we'd have that money for the deductible, the KERMA money above that for any excess, and finance the loss that way. So we think things like this would require a formal board motion, perhaps next meeting if you agree, and then it would go on to the mayor's office from there. So, questions?
What is the total cost to repair the floor in the gym?
Well, we got, Rich, correct me if I'm wrong, it was about $295,000 for the floor alone. So we're going to be adding, again, the weight room ceiling and some of the elevator repairs to that as well. So we think it's going to be probably close to about 4 when it's all done.
That's correct, Mike. The gym floor, the price we received from Daleen Flooring was $295,000. I believe Sean from Public Works spent $30,000 on repairing the elevator, and I'm waiting for a price on the repair of the weight room ceiling.
Sorry, real quick, that was a total of 400,000, give or take?
Yeah.
And Mike, if I could just add one thing. So our first step, of course, was to call the insurance company, Kerma. They assigned an adjuster to the loss, just like if you had a loss on your homeowners. The adjuster came over, met with Mike, met with Rich, and suggested that a particular vendor, Daleen, as Rich said, be brought in to give us some ideas, make some recommendation. They're a company that does a lot of emergency repairs in gym floors in Connecticut when Kerma has losses like this. And the estimate has come from Daleen, which we like to think is the city's insurance company recommending it. So,
Any questions?
Yes, just one. The deductibles, that could be coming from our reserves or another fund.
what we'd like to do is ask for it to come right from the city surplus. So no, not from the reserves.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Questions?
Louisa, is it okay if I ask a question?
Absolutely, Rachel, absolutely.
When was insurance contacted initially?
Rich, do you know that initial contact date roughly?
I do not off the top of my head. I'd have to go through my emails.
That's all right. Just
Yeah.
it was January, February. I mean, as soon as it happened, was it?
Yeah, I know one thing. It was shortly after it happened. It might have been a day or two, but when we, the first conversations we had, they reminded us that our deductible was $250. We didn't think the loss was that big at the time, so they knew about it. We talked to Brian Carabetta, the adjuster. It was later when we realized the full extent that we converted that into a formal claim. I think that was a couple months ago.
Thank you.
I have another question. How soon after this all gets figured out with the deductible, do we anticipate the work being done and completed?
Rich, can you speak to that timeline?
Sure. As soon as we have the funding, I would expect, pending the supply, the availability of the materials, to be able to get it done by August, possibly going into September. I've spoken with Chip, the athletic director, and he has a plan if we weren't to have the gym ready for September.
I think the X factor here is how long it's going to take for it to dry out underneath. Because that if it's a hot, humid summer, that could extend the timeline.
Are we doing all repairs simultaneously? Or are we doing gym floor one, then weight room and working through the projects?
I think there will be some overlap, but we're definitely going to start with the gym floor.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve a special appropriate request to the full Board of Education and to the city for $250,000, the insurance deductible needed to repair the gym. Do I have
I'll make that motion.
second? Okay, first by Al, seconded by Michelle. Motion passes. Okay. Mike?
All right. So next up is a brief overview of what's happening in our security practices. I put together a little presentation here, so I'm going to share my screen. Everybody see it?
Yep.
Okay, great. So before diving into all the details of security, I wanted to sort of step back and just talk about security sort of in the broader context of schooling. I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the sort of delicate balance in which security sits. So I'd like to use this analogy of sort of gas and brake. And schools, you put a bunch of young, energetic kids together with, smart, thoughtful adults, and, people are curious, people have energy, things are going to happen in a school. And it's up to really the educators and the programs that are put in place to make sure that all that energy is sort of guided and channeled in the right direction. And that typically comes in the form of, like I said, programs and systems, right? And we see these things are appropriate, counselors and nurses and the academic program, social emotional supports, welcoming schools. When there's a sort of bigger change that's happening, right? When the systems that are in place in the school are sort of no longer effective at mitigating all the other things happening with students and in society more broadly, that ability to channel a lot of that energy, right? It can start to sort of spin out of control. And that's when you sort of need to apply the brake, which is something, more of like a behavioral control, right? A safety advocate, a police, SRO, emergency response, security, things like this, and if you think about schools and systems, these systems can, they can grow obsolete, right? If you think about technology, everything changed with a lot of school policy the minute everybody had access to the internet and on their phone and in their pocket. Needs changed immediately for students during COVID, and we had to go to distance learning. Sometimes systems just fail, right? If they just stop working, or too many people are called out sick, the systems aren't in place there to do what they're supposed to do. So it's helpful to think about this sort of gas and brake. And when you put this sort of behavioral control on, it really is a brake, ideally, while you go back and sort of recalibrate the systems that you have. And then you get things moving again in the right direction. And then you can sort of take your foot off the brake. So I want to keep this sort of idea in mind, because when we talk about security, we always want to think about it in the context of really what are the needs of students? What are we going to do to support them to make sure they have what they need, and that they come to school ready to learn, ready to, participate, ready to, sort of take charge of their own lives, and not need that sort of constant, force of a behavioral control. So I think we've done a really good job with this. Right now, our security staff, our total staff is about 41, and that's across our 20 schools. So in our primary center, we had two, but now we only have one primary center as of this week. So we have one primary center safety advocate. We have 13 elementary safety advocates, one in each school. We have 3 middle school safety advocates, again, one in each school. And then at the high school level, we have 12. All alternative schools have 2. And we also have one at our central registration office. So it's a total of 32 advocates. Just FYI, some of these positions are vacant. We had some late in the year resignations that we'll be filling over the summer. And then at the high school, we also have, or at the middle school and the high school, we also have SROs at each school. And then at the high school, we have 5 uniformed police officers. And then Mr. Torres, who's also on the Zoom today, and will be happy to field any detailed questions. is our coordinator of district security. So he's one district coordinator, and that brings us to 41 total security staff in the district. So we've done a lot in the last few years, and these are just a few of the sort of high level items. We put vandal resistant security film on our entry areas and exposed windows. So this is a film that, instead of being able to smash a window, the film keeps the glass together, and it would take a lot more force and time to break through a window. We also have a Raptor system for ID checks for guests. So you can put in somebody's name and it'll flag them if they're seen as potentially dangerous or shouldn't be let into the school. We've installed a lot of double door, they call them man traps. So if there is an issue, the person would ideally not be able to get out from between the two doors. We have these in Broadview, Rogers Park, King Street Primary, and Ace. And we've done a lot of work in routing foot traffic through single points of entry, just to make sure there's only one door. People come in, come out. That's where the advocate is. And we can keep track of everybody going into the school. So those are things that really have happened since about 2018. And we have a lot of things in progress. So I'll run through this list quickly. So we are hiring currently more safety advocates. I'll say more safety advocates. We have a TBD on what the total number is going to be, but right now we're backfilling positions from resignations. We are conducting security audits. I talked about this a little bit at the board meeting a couple of weeks ago with Officer March. We're currently about halfway through the 20 schools. We've got about 10 done. We're upgrading our camera systems. The old system was digital watchdog. It was kind of grainy. It just wasn't very good, to a much cleaner system called a Vigilon. And that'll be in all 20 schools. Rogers Park, Ellsworth, and AIS are currently in progress. And if you've been over to those schools, you've probably seen the guys up on the ladders fiddling around in the ceilings. We're going to be completing the acquisition and installation of a system called MutualLink, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about. This is really a sort of eye in the sky system. It'll allow us to have a sort of central command for everything from the cameras to the way we talk to and coordinate with emergency services if there is an emergency. We're going to be doing at King Street Primary an enclosure in the media center. So we'll be putting doors there so that they have a special space for lockdown should they need it. Every summer we do replenishments to go bags. So these are bags that principals have in their office just in case of a lockdown or a drill. And it has things like vests, stop signs, rosters, maps, just all the things you would need if you were, in a hurry to get out of the building and wanted to make sure you had all your essential stuff. We've been replenishing our radios district-wide. A lot of this got paid for with our state grant. We're constantly updating our security plans, especially as we put new cameras and alarms in. I gotta move my little screen here. And also in line with annexes, these are different, basically addendum that the state comes out with to say that you have to have certain things identified in your emergency plan. So Mr. Torres was telling me today, there's the latest addendum was 5, and now there's certain procedures that have to be in place. For example, for handicapped children, there has to be a person identified that's going to either help with the wheelchair or whatever it is. So we update the plans to make sure we're in sync with the city or the state guidelines. We're going to be doing an overhaul of our school safety committee training program, just to make sure it's up to date and it has all the sort of newest features and training procedures. We do constant maintenance of our key card systems and access logs just to make sure that, if people have been are no longer working with the district, that those key cards have in fact been disabled, that we've collected them, that people no longer have access to the district once they're no longer employees. We're constantly doing maintenance of the alarm systems in all our buildings just to make sure that they work properly. And again, I put this in here as a transition, completing acquisition installation of the MutualLink system. So this is a screenshot of like kind of one of the features that MutualLink is going to be able to do. So it's going to have these sort of high level maps of the school, and each on here are there going to be dots of where the different cameras are. So we'll know, if there was an incident that happened in the parking lot, this is Ellsworth. If there's an incident that happened in the parking lot, we'll be able to say, oh, look, there was a camera facing that area. We can pull up that camera and see what happened. It won't be in any classroom interiors. There won't be anything in the gyms, and there won't be anything in the cafeterias just to maintain student and teacher privacy. So this is really an as needed system. And then this is another one I talked about, the building audits. Like I said, we're about halfway through these. We've done about 10 buildings with Officer Marsh. He's a Woodbury PD officer, and he's a privately trained school security consultant. So just a little bit more about this. Rich Torres and Officer Marsh have been visiting the schools, and they walk through and they do a pretty exhaustive audit of everything from looking at the physical building, the entry and exits, exposure and accessibility. Is there sensitive equipment that somebody could rip out or damage? Surrounding areas and grounds. Are there a lot of trees? Is there a hillside? Is there a place people could enter the campus without being noticed? Is there appropriate signage so people actually know where to go when they're not pulling on doors and looking suspicious, even if they're not supposed to be, or even if they're not suspicious, they could just be apparent. Is the parking properly identified? Is there capacity for trespassing? Just general processes and procedures upon entering the building. Is the advocate checking ID? Are they in the right place when the person walks in? And again, other technology systems for security and anything else that they catch in the process. Okay, that's actually my last slide. I'm going to stop sharing and I'll take any questions.
Just to our committee and board members, I'll open it up to questions, but if we could just keep the questions to the information that Dr. Seelig provided in the slides today.
I lost the pictures of everybody. Is there, or we're going into another situation?
Sorry, Rich, what was that?
I lost the pictures of everybody.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Rich, at the bottom of your computer, you see a little camera, the blue camera at the bottom.
Yep.
Just click on that.
There you go. Hey, welcome back.
Teresa, you had a question?
How many cameras total are we going to have?
So that's situation.
Go ahead, Rich.
That's situational according to the size of the school. Basically, what I'm doing to all the schools is doing a 360 on the outside of the school, and also having cameras in the hallways of the schools. Again, not looking at classrooms, not looking at restrooms, not looking at cafeterias, not looking at gymnasiums. They're there so that way, in the event of a situation, God forbid, we have actually eyes to see what's happening coming up and down the corridors of each quarter in the school, and also a 360 surrounding the whole school in itself. Who's coming in on the main doors, who the secondary doors, and all the other doors that are pretty much not used as a primary or secondary. We'll have eyes on that, so that way, so it's all situational, as in the size of the school.
Is it possible to eventually get a count for each school? And who will be monitoring those cameras? Are we the SRO person, or are they going to be? I work at the library and we have cameras, but that's a small one building facility. And are you going to have the SRO officers sitting there looking at the cameras, especially if you only have one at the building?
So basically what I'm trying to work on, and actually am doing, the advocate of the school does have access to all the cameras. The SROs have access to all the cameras. So we're counting the high school, we're counting the 3 middle schools. Now the elementary schools, there's only one advocate. What I'm doing is I'm shifting also so that way the secretary can at least have eyes on cameras. So in the event that the advocate does a tour around the building, or has to answer to a call, if you will, in one of the classrooms, or a back door, etc., at least the secretary has eyes on the camera, which that secretary would be closest to the principal. In the event that that secretary sees something, they'll advise the principal immediately.
So, sir, there would be no dedicated person looking at those cameras all the time. The safety advocate will probably be on the move, on it, floating around the school, correct?
Pretty much, yes. So another
And-
thing that
And the school resource officer, the sworn Danbury PD, won't be sitting watching the cameras. Is that correct?
that's correct. Not all the time. That's why I'm trying to also implement it where the secretaries who basically secretaries of the main office who basically are always at their desk at least has another set of eyes watching the cameras at the same time.
Also, is there a master key? I'm just thinking Uvalde and all the issues coming out of there and walkie-talkies that work in the building. I mean, are we covered in those areas? I mean, who has master keys? And our walkie-talkies, do we have enough? Do they work?
So when it comes to master keys, the only people that have master keys, a hard key, would be the principal, would be the custodians, and some of the advocates. For the most part, they have a key card access. Me and Rich Jalbert in 2018 kind of noticed that each school needed more access from different points of the school in itself. So we added more key cards. And right now, I'm still continuing to do that to give more access to teachers in the event that they go outside with the kids and they have to enter the building immediately if they can. Also, the advocate and the principal, if they can go outside and they have other options to come in from the rear of the building, from the side of the building, all the way around. So there's always a door that, and I've been adding these on key card access. So that's just a card that you scan and it gets you into the door.
And that key card shows a constant log, so we can see exactly who tapped in, who tapped out, what time they came in. So that's actually a really great system.
It sounds good, but like in Uvalde, the police didn't have a master key. And that is a big issue. I think that shouldn't the police and fire department have a master key as well in
So-
case of emergencies?
So I have that covered. Danbury Police Department has a key fob that belongs to them. Their key fob actually works with our school system. I put them all into our school key scan system. So in the event of an emergency or a situation, Danbury Police Department, all they have to do is use their fob and they can actually get into the building when needed.
But
When
not,
it comes to the, I'm sorry?
will they have access to a closed classroom door also with that fob, sir?
So when it comes to that, then that's going, no, they don't have a classroom key, but they do have access to get into the building. When it comes to the fire department, I upgraded with the fire marshals, all the Knox boxes. What
So
that means is, huh?
Rich, I just want to provide some clarification about keys. And I think Rich Jalbert is still on the line. From school to school, there are likely hundreds and hundreds of different keys to our locks in this district. And so, I mean, you can just take one school. Rich, fortunately, we're going to have key people in that district that do have access to classrooms specifically. And I think what I'm hearing Mr. Torres talk about tonight is, as staff in this district, we have a key card to get into the building. But in the event of emergency, we definitely do not have enough keys to get in every single classroom in this building. I don't even know if it's feasible, and we're going to be talking about budget next Wednesday. We'll be talking about relocking this whole system if we wanted to get on a universal key system. But Rich Jalbert probably can give us a little bit more of a background on kind of the state of our keys in the system. But again, I would imagine from building to building, we're talking about a lot of keys.
Sure, Kevin. There is a master key in the go bag in each office. So in the event of an emergency, emergency personnel, police or fire department would get access to that go bag, and they would be able to get into every classroom. Years ago, also, we switched all the exterior locks to a secure, it's called the ASA key system, where if I was to give somebody that key, or if somebody found the key and went to Home Depot or Lowe's to make a copy of that key, they would not make a copy of that key. There's myself and two of my maintenance guys that are the only authorized personnel with accurate lock. So for instance, if somebody goes to make a copy of that accurate lock, they would call me to say, this person's looking for a copy of the key. Is that okay? So it's a very secure key system.
So Rich, the go bag for both Riches for that matter. So let's just say with to Teresa's question, if there's an incident at one of our schools and the principal or an assigned member has the go bag, am I hearing then that the emergency response team, whether that's the police or the fire department, they're directed to go to the go bag to gain access to specific classrooms if need be?
Correct.
Okay.
Sir, as far as the walkie-talkie issue that I heard mentioned, have you done radio frequency propagation studies, especially in the larger schools, such as DHS and Broadview and Rogers Park?
So this is a two-parter, and it's between me and Rich. Rich can explain to you that we put a signal booster in the DHS. Rich, can you break that down?
Well,
I
yeah, because
understand what it is, sir.
Huh?
I understand it. Their signal booster. It's
Yep.
an signal amplifier. So your quarter watt walkie-talkies can work in the black box theater as well down into the gym.
Exactly. So those were installed at the high school. So in every school, every radio does talk to each other, and it has a circumference of about 1.5 miles, close to 2 miles away from the school in the event that they have to go away from the school in a situation.
Right. I
Yes.
realize you used to use UHF frequencies, the same as the police and fire department. Will those signal boosters also work with their radios?
At one time they did, because I did test them. Right now, Danbury Police moved into new radios, and I'm working with Danbury Police to see if they can add one frequency to their radio like they had before, so that way they can talk to the all schools that we have on our radios. So that's something that's up and coming, and it's a work in progress, if you will.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions?
Just one on the man trap issue. We have a few schools that have them, but the majority don't. Is that in the process of being remedied?
Yeah, we have, we're hoping to get a few more of them in. Again, this is a construction issue. But yes, we're hoping to keep getting them in all the schools.
And Rich, can you speak to the history on that construction? Because it's my understanding prior to 1819, there was a study done. Some buildings were actually eligible based on their existing construction, my understanding is, and then some were not. So we took advantage of the ones, I guess, that were a little easier to implement. So can you just, for the board members who were not here at that time, kind of update on everyone on kind of the history?
Sure. Well, there's some schools that are easier to implement the man traps than others. For instance, King Street Intermediate. In order for us to successfully do that, I believe we would have to move the main office closer to the front of the building to prevent people from walking down the hallway. So we have looked at that, and I would like to work on getting that taken care of.
Thank you, Rich. And to be clear, we've funded these upgrades with grants over the years. And the security upgrades we are talking about right now are both being funded through grants. However, the grants are specific in its implementation, and so Mutual Link is part of one of those grants. Rich Torres can tell us a little bit more about that. But I don't believe the implementation of the vestibules inside the schools is part of this grant. And we would, if we want to be in a place where we can include more, we're definitely going to need the money from the city to do so. As it is, we've budgeted as part of our request for this year, $250,000 to match. I believe it's a $750,000 grant. So with 250, we would get the other $500,000. And so that's why the board saw this year $250,000 budget item for security, so we can get the match in $500,000. But that is specific purpose for Mutual Link and some other camera upgrades.
Thank you. Rachel, did you have a question?
Were security plans part of the audit?
The emergency plans of every school?
Yep.
Yeah, so they are part of the audit. They, Rich and myself go through it so that way he could see that every school is, again, situated individual. So
Rich is Officer Marsh, by the way. Sorry, not Rich Jobber.
Yeah, right, Officer Marsh. Every school is different, so we go and I show him the plans of each school, and I show him the difference of every school and why the plan changes, and I explain to him what's the difference from one school to the other. So that is part of the assessments, yes.
Okay. And who does there was security training in the presentation. Who does that?
We're overhauling that right now. It will be Rich, and we might be bringing in a few external folks, pending what we're able to do with some of the grant funds. But we want to bring in some official training companies and professional development.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone, for that. If there's no other questions, Terry, go ahead.
Is it possible we can get monthly reports on the status of all these points? Keep us apprised of updates.
Sure.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And also at WestCon, we used to have monthly security reports, incidents on campus would be reported. Is there anything like that is done for the Danbury district?
I don't think it's typically come out of security. I think Kelly's office might have something like that. I'd have to go check with her though.
Right. I think it's in the form of incidents with students is what we report out, Terry. I think that our reporting is certainly when we have incidents that rise to the level of the board. Certainly the board finds out. But those are oftentimes our security issues, the ones that rise all the way to the level of an expulsion, and the board is definitely going to hear about it. From time to time, there may be something that rises to the level I want to notify the board of the big items. But I would imagine security in our school district is probably very different from security challenges at the college.
I was just looking at summaries, be it monthly, semi-annually, or, yearly. How many instances of, knives found in schools or scuffles in the hallway, type of thing would be very helpful instead of getting it piecemeal.
Okay, so when Kara wants and makes her presentations, we do have our suspensions in school and out of school suspensions. So I could just make sure that's highlighted next year at that point when we do it, and we can give some updates, a little bit more regularly as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I guess we can move on to the last item. G building.
Madam Chair, before we move on, may I?
Yeah.
I was also curious on plans to possibly put audible alarms on all the doors. So if you open it, the alarm goes off. Not just something that contacts with an alarm company, but an immediate audible that people will know that door has been violated. Is there any-
I think we could talk about that. If it's not in anything new, I think we can do that in our executive session.
Okay.
Okay. ahead.
Okay, last one, G building. Rich, do you just want to give a quick update?
Sure. The city has repaired the compressors. So the air conditioners are all functioning properly. The thermostats don't have the error codes anymore. So I think everything's pretty good in G building.
And the air conditioners have been working and it's nice and cool.
Yeah, and I'm actually gonna call in the control company to set up some trending so we can monitor better ongoing temperature, humidity, carbon dioxide levels through our online building controls.
Great, that's good to hear. Thank you so much. Anything else? Any other questions from any of the committee or board members tonight? Okay, then I'm going to, I'll entertain a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of discussing security and strategies.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're moving into executive session. So we have to log out of here, guys, and log into the next.
Yeah, just in case there's a second calendar invitation that has the new Zoom link in it. So find that other one, and maybe I should hang out for a second. If anybody doesn't have it, I can
Michelle's tuning in. Okay, there we are. All right, if we have nothing else tonight, I will. adjourn. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight, and thank you for being so patient on this little bit longer meeting than was expected tonight. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And do I hear a second?
Second.